All right, here we go. All right, the Hangout is now live. Okay, I'm going to start the show. You guys know the deal. So we have the whole monologue piece. So basically, I'm just going to dive right in with a quick introduction, then we'll jump right into story number one. All right, here we go. All right, Martin and Craig, welcome back to This Week in Photo, guys. How you doing?
Doing
Doing
great.
great.
All
Glad
right,
to be here.
all right, all right. This is we've got I think one of our more interesting shows this go around with three really compelling stories to talk about. And I'll be the first to say we don't have compelling stories 100% of the time on TWiP. Sometimes we have to scrape the bottom of the barrel because there may not be any stories that cycle. But today we have a plethora of stories to talk about. The first one is Pictage. So a company I used to work for down in Torrance, California, is shutting its doors, and we're reporting this through the SLR Lounge. So basically, let me read the blurb to you. It says, last week, Pictage announced that it would be shutting down at the end of September. One big dog in the yard for online printing and proofing. Pictage's demise began a few years ago, yada, 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 and then they talk about how um, some of the issues that Pictage went through and how they decided to kind of retool and reboot, but it was a little bit too late. And when they announced that they would be closing their doors, the customers started scrambling to pull all of their files down off of Pictage and then crash their servers, and then it's just been a comedy of errors since then. And leading up to, like, with the last episode of TWiP, me reporting that the email that the CEO sent out saying, this is a huge mea culpa for the mistakes that happened with the files not being accessible and the site being down, and then he went on to say, sayonara. The site or Pictage as an entity is going to be no more. So in a lot of ways, it's a sign of things to come, or the current zeitgeist in photography in terms of these sharing services, because Pictage was a big dog in the industry, especially the wedding and portrait industry, and now that's changing. Martin, when you saw this, what did you think? Is this did you shed a tear? Did you think this was it was time for the evolution to kick in, or what? What was your first thoughts?
I've never used Pictage. I'm aware of the service, and they were one of the big names for quite a while. But it felt like reading the story. I mean, I've been in Namibia until a couple of days ago, so I've only just seen this story. But it was kind of a Kodak moment. It was like a more modern day Kodak moment.
Yeah.
Thinking, I mean, these big ships take a lot of steering, and it seems that some of them just don't manage to get their hand on the wheel quick enough. There's obviously been signs for a long time, and probably been ignored. Probably had some heads in sand, and just hoping that things would get better. And I think that's the kiss of death for a lot of businesses these days. You've got to keep your antenna up and notice when things are going the wrong way, and take preventative action. It seems as though Pictage didn't do that, and it's a shame. There was obviously a lot of talent there initially. I'm not sure what's happened over the few. I mean, obviously, if you were there, there was a lot of talent there initially,
Right
but
up until I left. No, I'm kidding. No, you're right. There's a ton of really smart, talented people working at that company, and passionate. And a lot of them I know stayed there to the very end. Like a really talented musician on the deck of the Titanic playing music. And
mm,
at some point you either got to pull that ripcord and or jump in a lifeboat, for whatever metaphor you want to pick, or
mm.
accept what's coming. Because there's an iceberg up there. I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. Craig, what about you? I wouldn't put you in the class of portrait photography. You're more high-end fashion conceptual, but
Right.
did this touch you at all?
Well, it didn't affect me. I mean, I don't use Pictage. It is interesting that they were the top dog, the number one for many years, and I noticed at this last WPPI that about a third of the booths were competition.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was jumping in, is doing this now, and a lot of them had some better services, right? Better features, more features, less price, whatever.
Yeah.
And they just weren't responding to that competition. They were just, as he said, a big ship, and it's hard to turn, and weren't responding to the market needs the way these smaller, nimbler guys were.
Yeah, yeah, death by 1,000 cuts, right? I mean, because there's tons of services like out there. Like I use one called Pixie Set, which is cool. Of course, obviously there's Smugmug, and I would say that Pictage in a lot of ways got Smugmugged, right? Because when you think of wedding and portrait and online proofing, the first company that comes to my mind is Smugmug, not Pictage. Maybe it was Pictage like 5 years ago or more. But today it's Smugmug, and then you think of like the fine art sharing, like stuff you're doing, Craig. And the first company that comes to mind is 500px.
500px.
Yeah, yeah. So, but in both of those scenarios, the first company that comes to mind is not Pictage, or was not Pictage. So, I mean, I don't know, Craig, continue with you. And I like to do this. If playing armchair quarterback, you get appointed, or you, like a year ago, 2 years ago, you were appointed CEO of Pictage, and you're like, Craig, Mr. Colvin, we need you to save this company. What do we need to do? We got X number 100 employees, we got thousands of customers that are relying on us. There's sharks in the water with the 500px's, the flickers, the Smugmugs, etc. What do we do? What do you say?
Well, so I'm going to back up just a minute. One of the things they said, the reason, they announced this back in the spring, that people weren't buying prints anymore. That they were seeing a very sharp drop-off in that, and that was how they were funding their business model, was basically by their fees they did associated with prints. So it would have to be, moving away from that print model and coming up with some additional services that you could charge your customers for, to recoup that lost revenue you're losing in the prints.
And they tried to do that, Craig. They acquired a couple of companies that were kind of diversifying their portfolio. Some back-end business services and album layout and design services.
But they were still relying on that print revenue. They didn't adjust their prices. There were a lot of places that could print a lot cheaper. And at the same quality as they could, and they had the album services and the retouching services could all be done by other people, and other people were doing it much cheaper. So I think because that was declining, you need to get away from that and offer some other service. I don't know exactly what that could have been, but go out and talk to your customers and figure out, take the best features from all of these, Zenfolio, Smugmug, 500px, and try to implement all of those. They were just too stagnant.
Yeah, no, right? I agree. Yeah, Martin, what about you? Armchair quarterback. What would you change? You're standing in front of the board, and they're looking at you with teary eyes. What would you tell them?
I'm not sure that. I think that what Craig's just said, is a typical example of what they were doing with their heads in the sand, because people are buying prints. They just weren't buying them from Pictage. Yeah. So, they saw the print sales dropping off and assumed people weren't buying prints. They are. People are buying prints. I don't know, statistically, maybe it's dropping as an industry, but what I think they needed to do was to just get more innovative. I mean, there are companies like Artisan State making flush mount albums. You can get these albums from a company called Artisan State, and when you open them up, they lay totally flat. There's no seam in like the spine of the book.
Yeah.
That beautiful paper that they're using. It's not so much. I mean, if one of their big things was print, then figure out how to get people buying from you again. That is probably a big thing to do. But of course, yeah, I mean, as Craig said, there's a lot of other stuff that they probably could have done just to bring themselves up to 2015, or probably hopefully 2016, 17.
Yeah.
And just really innovate. I think people want to see new cool stuff these days, rather than just trying to cling on to what you were doing.
That's right.
If as a company, if you're doing something that isn't working, you have to figure out how to either make it work or find something else And it's like Seth Godin always says, you don't want to be relying on one specific product. You know, if print sales is your center pole, then you at least need a few other poles or stakes in the ground to help make sure that that center pole doesn't fall over. And it seems as though they weren't really doing that. But I honestly, I mean, I think that another big part of it, and this is just conjecture, but I personally don't like keeping my images in online services. You know, and I think that that's a trend that's happening quite a lot. People will put their images on, you know, places like Smugmug, they're doing well, but I mean, you see by the fact that their servers are going down as people try to get their images out there. If I was using a service like that that could go down, I wouldn't need to rush and try and get my images out, because it would only be a backup. You know, if it went down, I would just say, okay, well, fine. You know, take my images can just be deleted, because I've got three, four other copies here, and here. Yeah. You know, if your only copy is a service like that, and you have to scramble to get it out, that's putting you as a business owner or even a hobbyist in a very vulnerable position. So
it's like the stock market, right? That's like
right.
Putting all your money in one stock and then getting upset when the stock crashes, right?
Yeah. I was really surprised by that, by how many people, right, are having to go download their images because that's the only copy of them. That just shocked me.
Yeah,
strange.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Yeah, and the other pieces, you know, I saw, what was it? I forget what company it was. A printer manufacturer. It started this campaign, this ad campaign. I think it's currently running right now, where they were basically railing against Facebook and storing your images online. And the gist of the ad that they ran that I saw was it was a mom and her kid she was talking to her second kid. You know, the other kid had been grown a little bit. And did you see this, Craig? And she's like, yeah, old Johnny, or whatever the kid's name was. Yeah, he was around before Facebook. That's why we have pictures all over the house of Johnny. You were born after Facebook. All your pictures are online. She gets upset and starts wrecking the house. You know? Yeah. I mean, there's some truth to that. I mean, Craig, right? There's some truth
absolutely.
to that.
Well, there was an article just this past week in the local paper about what happens after you die, and a lot of these Facebook, Google, and all that, their default is just to delete your account, right? So your heirs can't get those photos and can't.
They go with you. Yeah,
they go with you, right? You have to get a court order in order for them to hand them over. Wow. And so it's a problem. You know, archivists have been talking about it's a problem that, you know, all the photos are online and we're losing a lot of them, right? Prints last hundreds of years, or can, right? And the digital can be very fleeting and very hard to capture.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer, much like we say a lot on this show, is not binary. It's not one or the other. It's a happy medium of both, right? Martin, you're going to back up your photos, but you can also put them online in these cool services, but don't have all your eggs in one basket. You can print, but you can also share them online with people, so you can have the physical, you know, and enjoy the actual print and dead tree based product, but also the pixel based product as well. So there's no ors in photography for the most part, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, you know, it's sad news to hear when any big entity in the photography industry goes down. You know, Pictage, especially with the impact it's having on their legions of customers who are now, I would assume, scrambling to find their next thing, much like, you know, when Aperture was announced that it was going away, those folks started scrambling to find out what the next digital asset management software is. So, advice, Martin, to the folks that may have successfully gotten their images off of Pictage's servers and they're thinking, okay, what now? Where should I go? Do you have any suggestions for those folks?
Yeah, I mean, to me it seems natural, maybe not exactly advice, but don't make those services your only backup. If you're in a position where you need to scramble to get it down, then you've made a bad decision in the first place.
Yeah.
You need everything local. Once your images are out of your area of control, you've literally, you know, those services could go down. There's no saying that Pictage are even going to get their servers back up. They're obviously in a lot of trouble at the moment. Come September 27, they could just close the doors and leave. So it's really dangerous to have your images in places like that. And I mean, for me, for example, I'm traveling in Namibia over the last almost 3 weeks. By the time I went to dinner each night, or to the campfire or whatever, I actually, when we were at the camp, I only did it on the first night because my batteries all went. But I'd got 3 backups of all of my images by the time I go to dinner. And then the moment I get home, I come up here to my studio and plug my hard drive in, which I've got like 3 backups of on the road, plug the main one into my computer, transfer everything to my Drobo, and that automatically from that point, that's my 4th backup right there. But then that, as soon as it hits my Drobo, it starts to go into Backblaze. Backblaze, it's a big company. They're not going away. But even if they did, it's only one off-site backup. And I mean, for example, I'm paranoid. I mean, I did a podcast on this called I think it was Backing Up on the Road, an exercise in paranoia, I called it. But the paranoid people generally tend to keep their files longer. So just make sure that you've got things in the cloud, in various places. And I actually even every so often I use how your hard drives they double in size and halve in price every few years, Moore's law and all of that. Yeah. So I just take these old 2 terabyte drives that have come out of my Drobos and fill them full of my old image archives. And whenever I go to the UK, I take a stack of them to my brother's house and store them in his loft space. Just for the hell of it. Those drives are going to go to waste any other way. So try to get something off-site. But then at least if your house burns down, floods, earthquake, whatever, then you can go to hopefully somewhere else, either in the cloud, wherever, and get your images back. But I really don't recommend making services like Pictage your main backup.
It's that peace of mind, right? I mean, you say, paranoia, fuels this stuff. I would go further with that by saying, paranoia fuels natural selection. So he's right. And without paranoia, it's like, the cavemen see a bush shaking. Are you going to be paranoid and still go up to the bush, and not go up to the bush? You're going to be or accept it and go see why the bush is shaking, only to learn there's a lion in there. So paranoia is the fuel for natural selection.
It's part of our DNA, so we need
part of our DNA. Embrace paranoia, especially as a photographer with irreplaceable photos that you're never going to get back again if something happens. Mm-hmm. Craig, what about you? Ports of entry for the refugees?
Well, so it depends. If you were using it to provide proofs to your customers and let them select images and do prints, I would probably recommend Zenfolio or Smugmug. Because they both offer that service and are some very good options for people to browse it and make purchases right there. They're also they take a smaller percentage of the print sales than Pictage does as well, so you make a little more money perhaps.
Yeah.
If it's just displaying the images and you don't really need the sales off of it, there's a lot more options. You could even use Flickr, 500px. There's this. I've heard. I haven't used it, but I've heard CloudSpot is a interesting spot.
CloudSpot. I haven't heard of that
one. It's kind of the up and coming one that I've heard. Several people I know have moved over to that and really seem to like it.
CloudSpot. Making a note. There's always something new, man. It's like fishing in the ocean.
And it's a image proofing and delivery service. So a lot like what Pictage was doing. So they will do the retouching for you and organization and all that. For like, if you have a wedding or an event, you just dump your photos there, and they'll do as much as you need to have done.
Cool.
And then provide it to your customers.
Excellent. All right. Well, great discussion. We'll keep an eye on Pictage at least through the 27th when they're, scheduled to go offline permanently.
Yeah. But, I'm surprised at how quickly that's happening. Right? You mentioned Aperture, right? People have a year to get, make plans. Here they're having 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, which is sad. 3-4 weeks of spotty server access too. Yeah, right. To get terabytes of images down. Scary. Scary. Follow Martin's advice. Keep everything local and use the cloud as a tertiary solution for restoring your photos. All right, guys, coming up after the break, we're going to discuss Instagram recent update. And maybe it's an upgrade, but the recent update which finally drops the requirement for photos and videos to be square. All right, guys, let's jump into story number 2. Instagram is thinking outside the square. This story comes to us from our friends at TechCrunch. So, the gist of this, it's obvious what we're going to talk about here. So, Instagram is dropping the requirement for photos and images to be square. And I know a lot of photographers have even adjusted their, quote, look to square because of Instagram's popularity. They're like, yeah, I'm just going to start shooting square stuff. because it looks best on Instagram, and why chop off the left and right side of your frame to get the look? Why not compose it that way? Now they don't have to. Craig, when you saw this story, were you like hallelujah, or were you one of the photographers that decided to shoot square?
Well, a little of both. I don't use Instagram a lot. I've started more so in the past 5 or 6 months, and I tend to just take iPhone photos and put them to Instagram. So I set my iPhone to shoot in square, right? You can do that with your camera app in iPhone. Mm-hmm. That's one of the options, right? You can do panorama, square. So I've been doing that just because of Instagram. But a lot of things I didn't post because, right, it just didn't look good. I think it's more important for the videos than for the photos, but I think it's great that they're finally doing this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And for me, because I'm experimenting a lot with cinemagraphs and kind of that kind of genre of image making, and yeah, it's cool. You can do some cool stuff in square, but you can't force fit everything. Everything doesn't fit into the box. I'm just saying, Martin. What do you think? I mean, are you happy for this change, or are you like, the magic of Instagram was the equidistant or uniform square box, and this is never going to fly? What do you think?
Well, I've got to admit, I've never thought it's hip to be square. It's like one of the reasons I resisted Instagram was because of the square. I think it's a nice format, and I'm enjoying the square format with my Yashica medium format camera, but I just don't like being pigeonholed or forced to do something. And I'm one of this 1 in 5 people that just adds the big white border, and it looks horrible.
Yeah.
Once that image goes out of Instagram and out of their interface, like I set them so that the images go to Facebook and Twitter as well, linked to Instagram, and they look horrible. So I'm sitting here this morning looking at the show notes thinking, yes, finally you don't have to be pigeonholed.
A lot of people are saying that right now, I'm sure.
Yeah. I know photographers that have shot square and even started to really, even with their DSLRs or their mirrorless cameras, actually shoot in square. And I think if it works for you, then that's great. It is a nice aesthetic. But if it doesn't, then it's great now to be able to. And as Craig said, especially for video to me just doesn't work square. It's never been square. Photos.
Well, video was an addition, right? So Instagram started as pure photography, and then they grafted on video to let you do that. So. It wasn't. I don't think it was by design in the beginning. It was more of a necessity to keep the aesthetic and the look and feel of the square Instagram post. And they even went on to say that. So the story that that they're talking about in TechCrunch, they say the story they've heard that the reason that Instagram's founders chose square was because it looked beautiful and it looked really, quote, really nice in the feed that they were mocking up. So, and this came from Ashley Yuki, the Instagram product manager. So, can you imagine? So, for millions of professional photographers out there that use Instagram, professionals and non-pros and kids and everybody, they're using Instagram. A product manager at Instagram said, you know what, that looks cool. I think we'll go with that, instead of this, with no kind of, I'm imagining there was not a whole lot of user research or thought that went into
it. It just looked cool, right?
It looks cool. It looks cooler square, and I like square, so make it square for the world.
It reminds me of that Christmas ham story about the lady who she would cut the ends of the ham off before she would cook it. And her daughter goes, "Why do you do this?" She goes, "I don't know. My mom always did it." And they go to the mom, and she goes, "Well, my mom always did it." And so they go to the grandmother, and she reaches go into the cabinet and pulls out a pan and says, "See this pan? It won't fit a full-size hand." Right? They just did it. They chose it because it looked cool and it just stuck, and they've been doing it ever since, right? So,
Yeah.
Glad they got a bigger pan.
Yeah, I'm glad they got a bigger pan too, and it's high time for this change. And I don't know. I mean, do you guys think? Well, right now, I'm hearing from specifically in the fashion industry, a lot of photographers and models Instagram is their first place that they go. And Facebook is secondary if they even go to Facebook. It's all about Instagram these days, and a lot of the complaints have been about the square format. And now that they're doing away with that, do you think it's time for Instagram to kind of explode even further than it already has? Craig, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to start using it more as a result.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like Martin will as well. So I believe yes, it's going to attract a lot more people to it, or people that have been hesitant to use it in the past.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I
don't know if the fashion photographers have gotten so used to the square now they're not going to go back, but it still gives you the option to do square, right? So it'll do both.
Yeah. You know, there's the thing that gets me that's really seems strange. I mean, based on that product manager, or the marketing, the guy that decided to make it square. I mean, even 500px and most other my portfolios that I have on my website, they display a grid of square images, but it's just how they're displayed in the grid, and you don't have to crop them to do that. So it almost sounds like the initial decision was based on just like lazy development. I don't want to badmouth Instagram, because it is a good service. I'm using it myself, but if that was the reason, then just code it so that people can still put their images on there and make a square grid. Just crop the sides off when you're showing the grid view, and then when people click on it, you show the full aspect ratio.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not hard to do coding wise to display a square grid but still keep the edges or the tops.
It just might be a simple function of function following form. Like we said, it looks great. That's the way it's going to be, and we want to make a gorgeous product. And the operation and the functionality of said product can kind of fall by the wayside. But,
have either of you played with the new version? I
have not. I will tonight, though.
Because when you mentioned the grid view, I wonder if they will show it square there, but when you click on it, if it goes to portrait, if they're going to try to show portrait mode in the grid view. So
we shall see. We shall see. And I, for one, speaking of those folks that are using or making Instagram their first stop, I'm beginning to do that as well. And I guess part of it is that I have a disdain for Facebook, and it's growing increasingly strong over the years. Maybe it's me getting older and more curmudgeonly, but Facebook and me, Craig's shaking his head. Yeah. But Instagram seems to fit me more. It seems to fit me better than Facebook, because I go on Facebook honestly, and I just feel like I feel like I'm in a city of just stuff flying around that I don't care about, and I don't know if somebody's pickpocketing me or not, and I feel under duress on Facebook. On Instagram, I feel much more in control and much more zen. I don't know why, even though they're owned by the same company, but I feel much more zen on Instagram. Martin, do you feel zen on Instagram, or are you more of a big city Facebook guy?
I've never really liked Facebook. I'm there for I'm there really because a lot of people that I want to interact with are there, but I don't necessarily like the system. And some people I know I can only communicate with them on Facebook. So I'll use it, but it's not because I like Facebook. It's like a telephone. I'll pick up a telephone to call someone if I need to, but if they've got like an iPhone with the messenger, I'd rather text them half the time, because then you can reply at your own pace. Yeah. I'll use the medium that allows me to connect with the people that I want to connect with. But definitely, I mean, David Duchemin dragged me into Instagram in January. He dragged me in there sort of kicking and screaming, because to me it was another network that I've got to try and find time for. But honestly, I mean, once I was in there, yeah, I get the Zen thing. It feels, and like any social network or social network type service that I use, I at the end of the day, I use it on my own terms. If I'm sitting there, I've got half an hour on the sofa when I'm start twiddling my thumbs, and I think, okay, what can I do? And then I'll just go to my iPhone. I've got all of my images syncing to my iPhone, and I'll just pick a handful and throw them up there, and then take a look around, see what the people are posting. But it's on my own terms. I've never been one for trying to sort of commit a certain amount of time or commit all my time to that kind of network. I've got my main work and is most important, and most of the time the social side just fits in the gaps when there's nothing to do.
Yeah, and there's, like you said, there's a ton of them out there. Like one that I've been experimenting with lately has been Periscope. Have you guys seen that? And we talked about this on TWiP like 6 months ago when they first launched, and that's Periscope either was acquired by Twitter, I don't recall, but they're a Twitter company where you can live stream video out to your followers, and they can comment live, and it kind of pops up over the video feed, and they can tap the screen and heart if they like what you're talking about and that sort of thing. And it has that Snapchat-esque it goes away after 24 hours thing too. So it has that level of immediacy. It's interesting. I'm seeing a lot of photographers experiment with services like that. Jeremy Cowart, for example, has been pretty prolific on Periscope recently. And I'll say, a lot of photographers, not Jeremy, but I see a lot of photographers on there. It's a tool like any other. A lot of people are oversharing, just like they do. Like, do I really care what you're eating now that you could? Now instead of a tweet of what you're eating, I get video and audio of what you're eating. Yeah. Like, do we really need that? So it's in its infancy. So we're obviously all these things we're going to see what people do with it. Again, back to the Instagram thing. I'm excited that they're making these changes and continuing to innovate or at least evolve, the service that they're putting out there.
That's good stuff.
That's great.
Yep. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. After this break, we're going to discuss DxO and how they rated the Sony a7R II as the best sensor they've ever seen. All right, guys, jumping into story number 3. DxO Mark rates the sensor in the Sony a7R II as the best sensor that they've ever seen. This comes to us from Petapixel, and that headline says it all. That sensor has received the highest overall quality score ever awarded by the DxO Mark testing lab. So they gave that sensor in the a7R II a score of 98, setting a new mark and taking the crown away from the Nikon D810, which has a score of 97. So this is some crazy stuff. So, well, first of all, when I look at this, and Craig, I want to have you chime in on this, both of you guys. When I look at this, I'm like, okay, DxO, I'm not calling the validity of their testing into question, because I'm sure it's bulletproof and they've got guys in white lab coats and gear and sensors and all this stuff to arrive at this number, but I still don't know what's behind the curtain to get to these numbers, right? So when I look at it, I kind of think of it like, you go to the gas pump and it says, hey, this gasoline now with Techron, so it's like, wow, I should buy the stuff that has Techron in it. You having no idea what the heck Techron is, right? So same kind of thing. Craig, what do you think? I mean, when you see a DxO Mark,
well, I think it's a little different than the Techron thing, because that's just a marketing buzzword. It's like Corinthian leather was a word that Ricardo Montalban just made up during the commercial, right? That had never existed before, and now they sell Corinthian leather. Mm-hmm. So they are actually doing testing, right? There is a scientific method to this, and so it is qualitative.
Yeah, they have labs. They have full-on labs and testing facilities and all that.
So if they're saying it's the best ever, then in their test, the suite of tests they have, it happens to be the best ever. But a lot of it doesn't. I don't know that it matters that much. That it's 3 points, 1 point above the Nikon D810, and at that level, it's nothing that we're really going to see. I don't think. Right, the sort of things they do are they test color depth. dynamic range for landscape, a low light ISO in a sports environment.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about an ISO difference of like 2850 versus 2900.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not a big difference,
but it's that difference between if you're that guy that needs the absolute best of the best. So when you're on that photo walk, you can say my camera's better than yours. You need this one.
Exactly. Well, right. If you have to have the absolute best, then yes, it is. This shows which one's the absolute best.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Interesting. Martin, what about you? DxO mark scores, Techron, fine Corinthian leather. What do you think?
I've never heard of Corinthian leather, but I want some already. It's like, yeah, you clad me in that stuff.
It's got to be good with that many syllables.
Absolutely, it's almost like kryptonite. So, DxO they've got a very rigid testing procedure that so I trust their numbers, but I think that there's so much more to selecting a camera than the one that's got the highest score. I was on this show just as the Sony was announced, and I was excited by it, but but at that time I was already excited by the fact that Canon had just delivered a couple of lenses that I'd been waiting for a while.
Yeah.
And then the 5D comes out. I've never been happier with my Canon gear, and I know that people are sitting, all of the mirrorless crowd are sitting there thinking, fnur. But you know what? If you're happy with your gear, you don't have to necessarily chase the next best thing. I'm not going to get a Sony. I really am happy with the 5DSs. And I don't think, even though I'm interested in mirrorless for the fact that it's going to allow me to downsize at some point, it's not going to allow me to downsize for my wildlife photography anyway. No. So it's one of those things that I'm looking at and with interest. But even with this score, it doesn't make me want to go and buy one anymore because I'm happy with what I've got. And I think that's the biggest thing. There's a lot of people out there, especially when something new comes along, like a 50 megapixel camera. And I mean, there's so many people have emailed me trying to pigeonhole the 5DSs, saying, "Oh yeah, I'm sure you're really happy with it as a landscape camera." So, okay, I've just got back from Namibia and I've been shooting wildlife with it. It's not the best wildlife camera, but I would prefer a 50 megapixel file that I can do a lot more with and miss a few frames than get every frame of something at 18 megapixels with my 1DS, which I've sold already anyway. But there's just so much more to the best camera for each individual than the score that they get here.
That's absolutely right. Yeah,
it is impressive, and it's Sony are doing some great stuff. I don't want to knock them in any way. It's a great camera. If it fits you and your workflow and whatever, then you can be even more happy because it's got a great score. But that shouldn't be the reason really why you're buying the camera.
I mean, I think of a world without Sony. I mean, Sony obviously has their flaws. A-track, all this. You could go back in time and talk about all the flaws and missteps that Sony has made. But looking at specifically their digital imaging group and what those folks have been doing over the last couple of years, they're leading the industry in many ways, especially in the full frame and the low light sensitivity for sensors, and now with this DxO score. I can't imagine where the industry would be right now without a Sony innovating the way they do. I mean, we've got the Panasonics, we've got Olympus, we've got Fuji doing their thing, and Sony on this side catering to the folks that need the full frame, and all that data and that low light performance. Imagine if you subtract Sony out of the mix and what the industry looks like, because then you have, on the full frame side, you have the Nikons and the Canons. Martin, no offense, but you have the Nikon and the Canons out there who, frankly, aren't innovating that much. I mean, like this stuff is exciting coming out of Sony, and it gets us excited, makes us want to pull out that credit card. Not a whole lot on the other side that's like, wow. You don't hear wow a lot as attributed to many other camera companies lately. Craig, what do you think?
Well, hopefully that this pushes Canon and Nikon, right? We've
been saying that for 3 years, Craig. We've been saying that for 3 years.
Well, they're that big ship. Like
It's always the next Photo Plus Expo. Next Photo Plus Expo. We know they're going to come out with something.
I think it's going to be further out than that. They've been doing incremental changes and not revolutionary changes, which the Sony they have been. Right? It's great that they're doing this innovation. And if it's not pushing them, it's pushing the other mirrorless guys.
Yeah.
Right. The Lumix, the Fujis, the Olympus. Right. Anytime somebody is leading the way in an innovation like this, it's going to just raise everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have gear we can't even imagine a couple of years from now.
I know, it's crazy. Every time I look at something like this, and I'm sure you've been shooting for a while, you guys feel the same way. You look at something like this and you're like, okay, it can't get any better than this. Like you look at the Sony A7S with its low light sensitivity, and that thing had some sort of dark matter in there, and you're like, okay, this is as good as it gets. What could be better? And then they come out with this next one, and who knows what 2016, 2017 is going to bring us in terms of new innovations. It's crazy. I'm excited. I'm excited. And then you look at on the other side of the spectrum with the Micro Four Thirds, with the Panasonic and the Lumix and the 4K and 4K photo and all the stuff that they're pushing over there. There's just all these tangents of innovation that are happening with a few companies that aren't really doing a whole lot, but there's a whole lot of stuff that's happening in the industry that keeps us in business and keeps us with fodder to talk about on each show, right? So yeah, exciting stuff. All right, guys, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to answer a question from one of our listeners. All right, gents, it is time for some Q&A. This week's question is from Jackie Burnhans. And Jackie says, recently I attended a couple of concerts, and I wanted to bring my camera to take a few photos of the venue, crowd, and band, not for commercial use. Each venue had slightly different rules about what was allowed, with some noting that the bands themselves might have their own rules. The question is there an appropriate camera to take to a concert as an attendee that would take better photos and give me more control than my iPhone, but not get me kicked out? I know there are cameras with lenses you cannot change, but they zoom. What's the solution here? I'm happy to abide by the rules around not selling my images, but it's hard to figure out what the right thing to do is, especially as my budget is not unlimited. Craig, what do you think?
You'll make me go first.
Yes, yeah. You got to go to a concert and get good photos, but not get kicked out. What's the deal?
So there's a lot of variables at play here. So I would probably go with one of the smaller Micro Four Thirds cameras, because they have good low light sensitivity, which is what you really want for a concert. It's less about having a big zoom than it is being able to collect that light, because they're always going to be dark environments at concerts. And you can get these small lenses. The pancake lens, there's a 40 millimeter for the Micro Four Thirds, for example. That I believe is it a 2.8? Or maybe even faster than that. But it's going to get the light that you need.
Yeah, it's 2.8.
And it's not going to look like a big professional camera. You probably may or may not get kicked out for it. You'll be able to get it in the front door. A lot of them have limits on the basically from the back of the body to the front of the lens. And some of them say it has to be less than 6 inches, some less than 8 inches, some less than 4 inches. It varies by venue.
Yeah.
So with these Micro Four Thirds and the small pancake lenses, you meet that requirement, and then it's just each band again. Some are going to say no photographs, or no cameras besides phone cameras. So you can't do anything about that.
I wonder, and Martin, I want to have you jump in next, but I wonder when you're going to a band or going to a concert and you're getting all gussied up and you're going to go have a good time at a concert. And like this listener's question here, Jackie, like why? What do you want to do with those photos? I mean, she said she doesn't want to use them for commercial use. Is it specifically to put them on Facebook or Instagram or something like that? And she needs a good photo to brag to her friends that she went to see Nicki Minaj or whoever, or are you going to do something else with the photos? Because when I go to a concert like this, I'm happy with my iPhone. And I'll snap a couple just to say, okay, I remember it, but I'm not trying to get pro level Joseph Linaschke style photos at one of these events if I'm just there as an attendee. I wonder, Martin, what do you think? I mean, is there why are you do you think she's gonna print these, put them on the wall, or what? What's the purpose of these photos?
I don't know. I mean, we can only guess, but I think that I felt the same way. I was thinking, okay, well, if you don't want to shoot professionally, but you want good photos, I mean, I was thinking, I must admit, what's the point? But Jackie has, she's got a reason for asking the question. So I mean, I was thinking that it looks as though Jackie's alluding to a guideline that you can't have a camera with interchangeable lenses, at least for some of the concerts that she's trying to shoot.
Yeah.
Jackie could be a he as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the thing is, though, some venues, they say, yeah, you can bring in cameras, but it can't be interchangeable lenses, which is absolutely stupid rule. But, someone pulls these things out of their orifices, and it's just, I don't know how it even makes it into the system, but it sounds as though that's what she's alluding to, or Jackie's alluding to. So I was thinking, maybe some kind of a point and shoot. There's a lot of point and shoots out there with really long zooms on, like from 24 to 300 and things like that. But they're generally not that good with low ISOs,
right.
Or high ISOs, sorry.
Right.
So, you'd really need to look around. I think at the end of the day, a lot of the stage lighting for concerts, if you are going to be zooming in a little bit, the lighting can be quite strong. So, you might not need that high an ISO. But, yeah, again, it really depends on what you want to do with the images. If it's just for, like you were saying, Frederick, if it's just for sticking on Facebook to say that you've been, then even something, just a basic point and shoot with a good one of the long zoom ones, even if it's noisy, when you downsize for the web, a lot of the noise disappears anyway, so it can be grainy as hell when you look at it at 100%. But make it a couple of thousand pixels or 1,020 whatever pixels long and stick it on Facebook. No one's going to know the difference.
No.
So it really does. It depends what you want to do with it. So I think we really need a little bit more information on what the goal of the images is for, to give a really sort of definitive answer.
I think you could solve some of those long lens issues and low light issues by, buying a better ticket and getting closer. Get closer to the stage.
Well, she says her budget's not unlimited. So.
It's relative. Right?
Martin brought up an interesting point. If you can zoom in, and the lighting on the stage is often quite good. They sell zoom lenses for iPhone cameras, right?
Yeah.
That you can stick on the back of it. That might give you that extra little reach, and an iPhone camera it has the low light capability to handle something like that.
Yeah.
So that might be another alternative.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So Jackie, we need to know a little bit more detail. Comment in the on this post with more detail, and we'll see if we can't answer your question a little better. But in the meantime, buy a better ticket. Get closer to the stage. All right, guys. Listeners, if you have a question you'd like us to tackle on the show, just visit thisweekinphoto.com and click on that Submit a Question link to send us a question or even leave us a voice message. All right, guys, let's jump into our Picks of the Week segment. Remember, your pick can be anything as long as it is somehow related to photography. Craig, I'm going to let you go first. What's your pick of the week?
All right. So over the summer, I did a 28-day trip to Europe. And I did not take my laptop with me. I only took my iPad. And I was concerned about how I was going to back up my photos, because I like Martin, I like to have multiple copies. So I did some research, and I found this Western Digital My Passport wireless hard drive. I got a 2 terabyte version. It has an SD slot on the side of it that you plug your SD card in, you push a button, and it will suck all the new photos into the drive. So it doesn't do the whole card, it just does the ones that it hadn't gotten before.
Incremental, yeah.
Right? It also then has wireless on it, so I could then use my iPad to connect to it and browse them and edit them. I use Snapseed and would post the photos from my iPad, and they're all there on the the Western Digital Drive. I did shoot both RAW and JPEG, so I could have the JPEG to edit.
That
But
is kind of
I had a
killer.
backup of the RAW as well. And then just as a side benefit, because it was wireless, I ripped a bunch of movies before I went onto it, because I can never have enough movies on my iPad. I have maybe 2 or 3. So I had 15 movies, and my whole family, we could just log onto the wireless and watch movies while we're on the train or on the plane. It stayed in my bag in the overhead bin,
Oh,
and
that's
I was
perfect.
able to watch movies on the flight over.
What's the battery life on that thing?
It's well, so it lasted a 14-hour plane flight.
Oh, perfect.
Wow.
Wow.
It was pretty low at that point. So, but it goes easily, 10 to 20 hours of battery life.
Yeah, and you plug it in when you get to your hotel. I'm looking on Amazon now. It's available on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
They've got 2 versions, a 1 terabyte and a 2 terabyte. The 1 terabyte is $149. The 2 terabyte is $186. I don't see why you wouldn't just get the 2 terabyte
Mm.
at that price. But that's pretty amazing. So Craig, you give it sounds like you give it a glowing endorsement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to get a second one, so I'll have my multiple backups.
Which one did you get? The 1 or the 2 terabyte?
I got the 2 terabyte.
Of course you did. Who am I
Now,
talking to?
the theory was, right, I wanted to travel light. I didn't want to lug my laptop around, and I just used my iPad for everything, and that worked great until I left my iPad in an Uber car about 3 weeks into the trip. But that's a completely different problem.
Why? That's awesome. Right? Who used to do that all the time? Was it? I think it was Trey Radcliffe used to leave gear. No, Alex Lindsay.
Yeah.
Alex Lindsay used to leave.
Oh, and the seat pocket. Yeah, the pocket in the
on the
airplane.
plane.
Yeah.
If you're flying, always try to be behind Alex Lindsay. It's a trail of riches. All right, cool, Craig. That's great. I might have to grab that. It looks like a perfect addition to my camera bag. All right, Martin, what's your pick of the week? And by the way, your pick of the week is the same as my pick of the week. So we have a double pick
Sorry
of the
about
week.
that.
No, it's awesome, but it's a great product. So you get to tell folks about it. What is it?
Well, before I say that, all I want to say about the digital, Craig's pick there is that I wish it was CF and not SD, or they had a CF version.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully that's coming, because that would be useful. I used to use something similar, but that looks great, because it's not dedicated just for photos.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my pick is, remember the Astropad that we talked about a few weeks ago, and I ended up doing a pretty in-depth video on it on my own podcast. Well, they've released an iPhone version. I know that Doug Kay, when we spoke about this, he was saying, "Oh, ask them why they don't have an iPhone version." Well, they do now, and I've been testing it, and it works great. It's even easier to carry around now, because you always have your phone with you. If you want to take your iPad, it's an easy item to take with you. But if you're out and about, then just take all you need to do is to get the stylus, one of the styluses that works with the Astropad, and you're great. You're ready to go. So I've had a play with it. Works really good. You can just 2 fingers pinch and zoom around, or move around, select any of the options that, because you're basically just using Photoshop remotely. So if you take the toolbar from Photoshop and drop it over this, in the area that you're looking at on your phone, you can do anything that you can do on the computer, but you're writing directly onto the image. So it's like getting a Cintiq for the price of a stylus, if you're assuming you've already got an iPhone or an iPad, it's just really, really good solution. So I'm loving it. I was using it in Namibia, just messing around a little bit. It's great. It's a great tool, and I couldn't recommend it more.
That's cool. That's cool. I'm trying to stop the screen share, but it's not letting me stop the screen share. Thank you, Google. Thank you, Google, for.
So is it sync? You said it's doing a remote view of your Photoshop. Is it?
Yeah.
How remote is that? Do you have to have your laptop there with you? Is it a local Wi-Fi, or is it going through the cloud and you can do it back to your home computer?
I'm not sure if you could do it the other way, but you can definitely. It's the way that it's really being sort of recommended to be used is is you're sitting with, say, a laptop with the image in front of you on the laptop, because you've got to actually see or be able to manipulate the computer to open your images.
Okay.
It's really just like an extension of your, once you've got your image open, then you would fire up Astropad and use it to do the retouching. But yeah, I mean, it would be a little bit awkward to try and do the rest of it remotely as well.
Yeah, and do you find that better than using like a Wacom pad or Wacom tablet to do the editing, or is it just because it's the convenient you have it there with you?
I think it's a bit of both. The Wacom, I mean, I'm still using the Intuos 4. The Wacom is great, but the thing that you don't get on the Wacom is that you're drawing on a black piece of plastic, and you're always looking at the screen. So the eye-hand sort of thing is always a little bit out. And although you get used to it, I don't think it's ideal. And that's why, of course, Wacom make the Cintiq, where you actually have the image on the screen and draw directly on it. And it's like that. You literally, if you're looking at something, when you put the stylus on the screen, you're putting it exactly where you want to draw. And so you're getting the instant feedback, and it's fast. I mean, the iPhone Plus is, I believe, is 60 frames per second. So there's virtually no lag. So you're literally drawing directly straight over the image. Just works really, really well. I think it probably works better on an iPhone Plus because you've got the bigger screen. That's what I just tested it with. But yeah, it will work with any iPhone, I imagine.
Yeah, it's great.
What stylus are you using with it?
You know what? I'm using the one that the Adonic team recommend, and it's the Jot Touch with Pixel Point. Yeah. But you have to have the 2015 version because the older one doesn't work quite as well. And before I spoke with the Astropad team, as I usually do. That I jumped in and grabbed a Wacom. I forget the name of it. A different one of the newest Wacom styluses.
I had been looking at that one. Yeah.
It doesn't work well with Astropad, and honestly, I think it's Wacom saying, okay, well, we're just going to hide a few of the API elements from you because we don't want you to steal our Cintiq sales. It could be that. But yeah, I mean, I actually, if anyone's interested, and we will finally at some point get this in the TWiP under the TWiP umbrella. But if you go to mbp.ac/483, I've actually got a pretty in-depth video on the iPad version, and it's pretty much the same. There's only a few differences, but the differences make a lot of sense. Like the thing that I've noticed is that on the iPhone, you can't open, there's no button to open the preferences that you just change the shortcuts that you're using. But on your computer, you can do it right there in the little. They've made a really good change. Just open it on the computer, and they may have even changed it like this on the iPad as well. So I'm not sure if they've still got feature parity between the two. But there's only one thing that I've noticed at this point, and it's actually something that makes a lot of sense anyway. So. It's all good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's an important product for for the industry. It's disruptive, right? So I'm sure the folks at Wacom are sitting on the edge of their seats wondering, okay, what should we do next, and what's up with these guys, and where did that come from? Which is good. That's what Silicon Valley is all about, right?
And the guys at Astropad, it's just a two-man team. They're ex-Apple employees, but they're the nicest people. I actually had a problem with my mail server over the weekend, and Giovanni, one of the two of them, was just like every half an hour was sending me test. Giovanni, can you send me another test email? And he was sending it, and I've just found out this morning from Matt, the other guy, that Giovanni was actually off sick over the weekend. So I was bugging him with test requests and. But they're great guys, So, and that's not, of course, the reason why I'm endorsing the product. That all came after I fell in love with Astropad.
Yeah, and I've met Giovanni as well in person, and you can see the passion of what they're doing come through. In fact, I recorded a video for TWiP, which will air soon now that this product is out, of kind of a behind the scenes of them putting together and working on Astropad. And there was this one guy from Japan that kept bugging him while he was trying to work. I don't know. It's like if I could just get this
Constant
one line of
interruptions.
code in, I'd be golden. No, I'm kidding.
All right. Well, I have my my Jot pen on its way.
Awesome.
Oh,
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah, I have one as well.
Ordered it while we were talking.
Oh,
Yeah,
look at that.
excellent.
Look at that.
You'll
Yeah,
love it.
we spent some of your money. You spent some of our money. Craig.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, guys, we're gonna sign off. But Craig, what do you have coming up in the coming months?
Well, let's see. Trey Radcliffe is doing a photo walk in San Francisco to promote his new Peak Design bag and the Arcanum, and I'm going to be there as an Arcanum master.
Excellent.
So anyone who's local in the Bay Area wants to come say hi, come see me. There'll be 500 people there, but I'll be the guy with the beard. And and then other than that, I have a bunch of shows coming up in local Palo Alto and in Oakland. Both of them on October 15th. And information on my website. Anybody interested in coming, meeting me, and taking a look at my photos.
Awesome. All right. And speaking of your website, where can people go to keep up with you?
CraigColvinPhotography.com.
Excellent, Craig.
All things Craig lead from there.
There you go. That's Rome. Thanks, man, for coming on. Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Always enjoy it.
You're welcome. And Mr. Martin Bailey, what about you? What do you got coming up in the coming months?
Well, in less than 3 weeks, I'll be joining my group for this year in Iceland for my third Iceland tour. And then after that, I've got a few months where I'll be doing a little bit of writing and and other stuff, of course, and then also just starting to prepare for my winter Japan tours. But I did want to say, I mean, I've actually just set up. We're already taking bookings for 2016 Iceland, and we've only got it. The tour's over half full already. So if you're interested in joining us next year, take a look at nbp.ac/Iceland 2016.
And that's the one Doug Kay went on, right?
It is. Yeah,
Oh,
Doug was great to travel with.
We need to go, Frederick.
I know.
It's on my bucket list.
Iceland is so on my bucket list.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. We're doing Greenland next year as well. Before I go to Iceland, we're doing a Greenland tour, and that's going to be pretty amazing.
Try to catch a glimpse of some icebergs before they go away.
Well, I mean, there's icebergs in Iceland, but they're just bigger and better in Greenland. But of course, you know that the Vikings, when they named Greenland and Iceland, they did it the wrong way around to confuse people. They got to Iceland and thought, oh, this is great, look at this, it's really green, so we'll call this Iceland and make everyone go to Greenland, which sounds great, but it's really just cold and, but...
they may have been drinking, those
They may have been drinking, yeah. But I'm really looking forward to both of those next year. So, and it'd be great to see any of the listeners if you wanna come along.
Excellent. And what's the URL where they can go find out about that?
Well, they're both at mbp.ac/Iceland 2016 and Greenland 2016, and then you can find them on my website martinbaileyphotography.com under the tours link at the top. There's everything that I'm up to is all linked in there.
And we'll link to them obviously from this blog post as well.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well, that brings us up to the end of another episode of This Week in Photo. I want to thank our sponsors for their support, FreshBooks, Squarespace, and lynda.com. Be sure, listeners, to visit our awesome website over at thisweekinphoto.com to check out all of our shows. I think we're up to 9 right now, and hopefully we'll get Martin Bailey's show incorporated into the collective very soon.
Yeah.
We got to get that going. That's all me.
We need to wrap that up.
Yep, we need to wrap that up, get that going, and start firing on all cylinders there. But with that, it is time to take that lens cap off.